Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is ANN Profiles. Today, we are here with James Winegardner. He is the president of Adventist Risk Management.
Hi.
Hey, James.
Nice to see you.
It is nice to see you. We kind of go back a little ways to Texas days, Keene, Texas.
We didn't know each other there, but we were there together.
We did. Actually,
It's a
you
large
and I
state.
ran into each other, though, at the General Conference session, and you found out we were going to a church near you, and then you were like, you should come back. And
Yes.
That was my first introduction to James Winegardner.
There you go.
But obviously, your story does not start in Keene, Texas.
But it does start in Texas.
It does. So you're a Texan.
San Antonio.
San Antonio, Texas. So tell us, James, you were born in San Antonio, Texas.
I had a mother who was Seventh-day Adventist, second generation or so, second and a half, something like that. A great uncle of hers had introduced the church, the family to the church in Illinois, and I guess middle of the last century. And she was married to a man who was an agnostic Episcopalian. And my father was a very, very brilliant man, but he had no apparent religion at all. But my mother took us to church, and we were as active as one can be without entering the Adventist school system. And so we were active in church. My mother was the singer there, and we did a lot of activities there, but my father never went.
Now, were you involved in like Pathfinders, the typical kids club things?
We tried Pathfinders a couple of times. It never really took. Our home was, in those days, San Antonio had one English-speaking church to speak of, a big one, and it was quite some distance from our house. We lived out in the country, and so our trips into church were somewhat laborious. So we didn't. Those kind of extra meetings didn't take very often. So no, we tried it, but it was just quite a commute.
Wasn't in the cards for you guys.
Wasn't in the cards for us.
That makes sense. So you said without being in Adventist education, which makes me understand that you went to public schools.
My sister and I went to public school. In those days, there was one academy in San Antonio. It was a junior academy, and it was also even farther from our home than the church was. And so my sister looked at Valley Grande Academy at one point, but we stayed in public school straight through.
So you have a Seventh-day Adventist mom and an agnostic Episcopalian father. I got that right?
Yes.
Was he pretty okay with your mom
Totally
doing
supportive.
it?
Totally supportive. He didn't hate God. He just felt he had his own kind of personal relationship with God, and it was a very subterranean experience. And then near the end of his life, he made a profession of faith and accepted Christ. But he was near his deathbed at that point.
So you have all these early years. Were there any experiences that were in your childhood years that you see kind of put you on a trajectory for any of the careers? Because you've had a few different careers, and we're going to go through some of those. But were there any pivotal moments in childhood that brought you to this?
You know, we're all born with a personality. I don't know how much we can change those personalities. You can ask a psychologist that when you have one here.
Will do.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll let you know the answer.
Jot it down. And so my personality was what it was. My mother was extremely dominant, so my personality was very subject to hers. And so as we went through, I had a love for the church, a love for the people. Our church was one of those churches, in every conference has them, where the pastor of our church often goes on to be a conference administrator. So we knew a lot of conference administrators that had worked through the system. And so Joe Cruz was the pastor of our church when I was a little child. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I would just say a permeation of an understanding of who the Adventist Church was. And I have a very good memory, so I was delighted I didn't have to hear these messages more than once. I went through 5 or 6 evangelistic series as a child, and you kind of know that after you've heard that 5 or 6 times.
So would you say, because you didn't have this, I don't want to call it typical, Adventist bubble, okay? Right. How do you feel like that has, like, how it shaped you as a child?
I don't know what the path would have been. All I know is that the path that it took me has been dramatically circuitous. There's really no predicting what happened in my life. It went in so many different directions so far that any attempt at prediction would have been a farce.
So we should definitely not have gone out like a crystal ball or something.
No,
it would not have been.
No.
It would not have worked for you at
No.
all. Which it was not one of your many career traits,
No.
anyways, which you wouldn't have done well in, apparently.
In fact, when I got to high school, junior high school, I was active in the church. I really hadn't any other choices. I worked at the Southern Baptist Church that my aunt went to. And so
what'd you do there?
I played the French horn in their orchestra.
Okay.
And so I got paid to go to church on Sunday, and I went to church for free on Saturday. and so I went to 2 churches all the way through high school. In junior high, I started playing an instrument in elementary school, and I was terrible at it. Really, really, really bad. I started playing the French horn. I could tell you stories, but I was really bad. Just trust me.
Well, let's get one story.
So they taught us the scale. And so I learned my C scale because that's the one that I learned. And I didn't know there were more than one scale. So when they would say, now let's play the G scale, I would play my C scale again. And they would say, now let's play the F scale, and I'd play my C scale again. And so I was just terrible. Didn't pay any attention, didn't practice much, and I was just terrible. And then I got to junior high, and they put me in the B band, not the A band. And that was a significant humiliation, and I didn't realize that music could be competitive. And as soon as it became competitive, I got very serious about it.
So I'm learning something here. Not necessarily that you loved French horn originally, maybe you do now, but actually what we just learned about James Winegardner is he's a competitive person.
So as soon as it was clear that I could be either a higher chair or a lower chair in my band, I resolved I did not want to be a lower chair anymore.
And that you could be in a better band.
And I could be in a better band. So midway through the year, when they moved me up, and then by the end of that year, I was first chair, and that made me very happy. And so all the way through high school, there was a significant rivalry and competitiveness for that.
Excellent. So for that French horn slot.
Yeah, and all the other kind of competitions that went with that, yeah.
Got it. As a highly competitive person myself, I totally understand what we're talking about here.
Right.
So music became a part of your life.
And unfortunately, I didn't do very many other things very well. I had taken speech, I'd taken class. I knew I was terrible at math, but I didn't know what I really did well besides music. And I really like music theory. I like all that, but I didn't play the keyboard. So I said, well, I don't know what to do, but I do music. So I applied to several colleges for a scholarship, and I got a scholarship to SMU to play the French horn.
So SMU meaning?
Southern Methodist University, Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
It's a beautiful university.
Most people don't know initials.
Right.
We do
SMC,
love our...
we love that one.
Southern Missionary College.
Yes,
or,
that's right.
as my parents would say, Southern Matrimony College,
There
which
you
is
go.
now Southern Adventist University.
Yes.
But yeah, you can totally tell there's a whole generation thing when we go with the SMC thing there. But yeah, so did you go to SMU then?
Yes.
Okay.
So I started at SMU, and I was really engaged in playing music, and didn't really know where I was going to go with that. As the first year passed, it became clear to me that there are about as many professional orchestras in the United States, and French horn plays in orchestras. You're not going to get that in the Beatles, So it's an orchestra instrument, and so if you're going to play in an orchestra, there are 5 spots. So it's about as easy to get on a professional orchestra as it is to get in the NBA in the United States, because about the same number of cities has a professional orchestra as has an NBA team. And so I thought, that's really cool. I think that would be a really great goal. I'd love to be a starter on the NBA kind of level of achievement.
Orchestras.
My competition kicked in, right? And then I found out that they didn't get paid very much. And that if you get in a professional orchestra, then you're still teaching 40 students a week. And I thought that just sounds horrible to me, being stuck in a room with a beginning French horn player for a half an hour for 40 of them a week. That would just be an awful experience. And so I started casting about a little bit. It was at the same time that I met a young woman who had been preyed upon by one of her instructors or teachers and had been abused. And Jesus redeemed her out of that. And she made some very, very courageous decisions, and God protected her and delivered her. And I thought, well, this is what I grew up with, is this whole miraculous God. But I've never really engaged that except at church. And here I see it making a huge difference in a person's life. And so I had a decision to make. What would I do for a career? But also at the same time, I had a decision to make because this young woman was Methodist. And I thought, what is it? Is hers the truth? Is mine the truth? I mean, I always assumed mine was the truth, but I never really studied it on my own for myself to make sure that our message was the best message. And so I took some time and I really did start to study it. And I got to the lick log and I said, this is it. This is the truth. And
real quick, were there any things in particular that you had to kind of study a little more thoroughly? Were there things that you maybe struggled a little bit more with?
I just had to start from the top. And so you start with the Sabbath, obviously, right? And the scripture is really clear, and there's nothing in scripture that changes it. So, I mean, that becomes obvious. Well, that just narrowed down almost all the other churches on earth, right?
Fair.
And then you go to the state of the dead. Probably not an issue that anybody's going to be lost over, but it is an issue that the Bible has some ambiguity on. But when you look at the balance of it, it's clearly we're not, I mean, the great scholars through time, the great theologians through time have never been unequivocal the other way. It really is, this is the right answer. And then down through the rest of them, Ellen White calls them pillars. And the pillars are the distinctive beliefs. They're not the real beliefs. They're the distinctive beliefs.
It's like this. I believe there's 7 pillars, right?
Five or seven, but yeah.
So there's like 7 of these doctrines, these pillars of our church,
right?
And the rest of our fundamental beliefs kind of are they're
among the fundamentals.
But these are the 7 pillars
the
of
pillars.
our faith.
She calls them pillars, and again, I wish she hadn't, but she did. And she calls them pillars. They are the distinctive beliefs among the Christian faith. And that's a really big question for the future in the developed world, because if you look at the pillar beliefs, back in a really deeply Christian era, a century ago, those beliefs were within Christianity a dividing point that made us unique, distinctive, and correct, in my opinion. The problem is that they're not as meaningful to someone who has no appreciation of Christianity. Distinctive from what? They don't have the ground base that people 100 years ago had. And so it is time for us as Christians to readdress what the gospel means in a wealthy, fully developed economy. Big issue.
Not that those things are
still as important as ever.
They're still truth.
Still as important as ever.
But how do we actually show a God
but they're
to
irrelevant.
non-Christians?
Right. They're irrelevant to non-Christians. You talk to them about the Sabbath, they say, I don't even understand that. I trust your Bible. What would you be talking to me about something the Bible teaches? I'm not there. So yeah, it's a hard question. Sorry, we got a little off.
No, actually, this is what we love about profiles is that sometimes we tangent, but these are all valuable because this is actually talking about why we are who we are and where we are now. So there's a woman,
girl that I knew at school,
that you knew, and so she challenges you to start really defining am I a Seventh-day Adventist in name or in heart?
Right. Do I really believe this, and is it the right thing to believe? And so, yes, got through that successfully. And then...
Are you attending an Adventist church?
No. Yeah. Oh, yes.
When you're at SMU?
Of course. Dallas First.
Dallas First. They get a shout out here. Dallas First.
Right. It was a great church. Before the remodel, you wouldn't recognize that. But anyway, it's right on Central Expressway in downtown, uptown Dallas. Very, very great church. Anyway, so the career problem was still wide open. And I thought, and you can talk about a calling, and some people get this calling on their heart. But for me, it was, what could possibly be better to do with a person's life than to engage in what I'd just seen happen to this young woman, which is miraculous life change for people. And if I have an opportunity to do that, and so I went and talked to my pastor back in San Antonio, I talked to my mom, I even talked to my dad, and they all supported that. So I said, great. So I transferred to Southwestern Adventist University. It's a long time ago now, 1980. I
was born in 1980.
Yeah, I understand. And so
I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
I understand. So I transferred to Southwestern Adventist. My sister was already studying there. And in the next 2.5 years, finished all of the coursework for a degree in religion. They didn't have theology in those days. Didn't teach Hebrew there, only taught Greek. So
and that's the differentiation.
It was, I think.
Okay.
Don't know if it still is. They have a committee for that. Anyway.
And you're not on that committee.
I'm only an observer.
Oh, okay.
An advisor. So anyway, the point is that I finished there and went to work for the Texas Conference starting-ish in 1981.
So let's just back up here a little bit. So you see how this woman is, through the power of Christ, is changed.
Right.
And now you feel like the ministry. You want to be a part
Right.
of changing people's lives.
Absolutely.
You go to Southwestern, you finish your religion degree.
Yes.
But you're still going to stay in Texas. I mean, I
had
this
never
was
even
actually
thought of
something-
leaving Texas.
This is a very interesting thing to me because we did meet in Texas, but in America, a lot of people have been moving to Texas. And I guess in my mind, I didn't realize you're actually like a natural bred Texan, because there's that bumper sticker that says like, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as soon as I could.
Right.
You were just like, no, I am here.
Yeah. So my parents were from Chicago area, from Illinois. And so I don't have quite the accent many Texans do, but I'm sure I have some of it.
There's a little hint of it there.
And I do like the word y'all a lot. So
we'll need to drop that a few more times.
Yeah, that's right.
Just for all our fellow Texans.
So yes, I am really a Texan. I've lived all except 4 years of my life in Texas. Okay. Oh. And that's a lot of years.
And are these the last couple of years that are the
2 here and 2 in early 2000s? Yeah.
Okay, we'll get there.
Okay.
Let's not go there too fast apparently. But sorry, so you start off. What church are you at?
They gave me the Fort Worth First, and the fellow who was the pastor there was a recently returned missionary from the Inter-American Division, Bobby Roberts. And so Bobby Roberts had baptized tens of thousands of people throughout the Inter-American Division. Because of the generation, most of the people who knew him are passing now. But the lady that does the tours over in the Ellen White Estate is a person who knew him in Inter-American Division. They lived in Guatemala in a compound with the Falkenbergs, and so they were Inter-American people for like 25, 30 years.
Okay. And you're called to Fort Worth First as a associate or a youth pastor?
Intern.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I'm an intern there, and he was planning a church at Fort Worth Northwest, and his son was a year ahead of me at Southwestern. And so his son introduced me to his sister, whose name is Mary Ellen.
Oh, I know her.
Yeah.
I say hi to her a couple times a day.
Yeah. So I'm right out of school, and he introduces me to Mary Ellen, and she seems real sweet. And so I'm working for the dad. I know the brother. He's working at another local church.
Seems like you should become part of the family.
Yeah. And so I did. It took some time, but I did. And so I started dating her, and they moved me to Houston, and I interned in Houston for a little while. And then after I was in Houston a little while, it was time to think about the seminary.
Why is it time to think about the seminary?
I guess after you're an intern a couple of years, they send you to the seminary.
Got it.
And I don't know why, but I had an overwhelming feeling that going to the seminary was going to mess up my relationship with Mary Ellen because I was going to be in Michigan.
You're just dating?
Yeah, we're just dating, and I'm in Houston and commuting back and forth to Dallas to keen to visit with her.
For people who have no idea, Texas, I mean, we understand Texas
yeah, it's
geography.
5 hours.
So it's like a 5-hour drive.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And so I wore out a car doing that. And so
that's actually really sweet because that means you visited her a lot.
I did. And it was time. It was time for the conference to send me to the seminary. And I really didn't want to go to the seminary. I thought I'd lose Mary Ellen, number one. That was clear to me. Number two, everybody tells horror stories of the snow and how terrible that place is.
So when we're talking about the seminary, we're talking about Andrews Theological Seminary, which is in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Yeah. So it's like, actually, I think it snowed there like last week.
Yes, it did.
So we're recording this in, I don't actually know what month I'm in. Are we in April? We're in April. We're in April 2023. For anyone who's listening to us or watching this later. And it just snowed there like a couple days ago. So it's this cold, dark, dreary.
I've never been there, but I've heard that.
You've never been to Andrews?
Never been to Andrews.
Like still?
Right. I think I went to Battle Creek once, but.
Wait, how have you not? All right, that's going to be a conversation off record. I don't know how you have managed to get this far without having ever visited Andrews.
I've known 2 presidents of the university, but I've just never been there to visit it.
I'm going to figure out a way to correct this at this point. And I'm going to make you go during a snowstorm.
All right. Yeah, no. So I said, I think I'd like to go to law school.
Law school.
Yeah. I'd always loved the concept of law, and my interest in the Bible was frequently focused on the question of law. We Adventists, we like the law, love the law, as David points out. I love your law, Lord. And I studied it all the time. Exodus, Leviticus, really important laws in there. And so I was always studying those laws, and I thought, well, I'd really like to learn more about our laws too. Not knowing if I'd ever really want to practice law, but I thought, let's see. And so I took the LSAT on a Monday morning at a university.
I know I'm going to keep asking whenever we use our acronyms.
Yes.
For anyone who's listening around the world. And the LSATs, as they're called, is the what?
It's the qualification exam to get into law school.
Okay.
In the United States. And so, and for people around the world, the United States has a single law system. So lawyers do everything. They can do anything except patent law if you get a regular law degree. Patent lawyers have to have an engineering degree first. Anyway, so I got accepted. I went to the conference, Cyril Miller, and I said, I'd like to go to law school instead of the seminary. Do you think you could support that? And he said, no. He said, we don't need lawyers. We need pastors. And I said, yeah, but I mean, I could be really useful to you as both a lawyer and a pastor. And he said, no. We want pastors. We don't want lawyers. If you go to law school, we'll consider that your resignation. So I got accepted back at SMU at law school and had a very difficult decision to make. And I decided to resign and go to law school. All kinds of problems with people who believe that the calling is indomitable and all that sort of thing, right?
How did you reconcile that? Because we kind of talk about this calling,
right? And
I feel, I'm not saying that I absolutely believe people are called to ministry,
right?
But sometimes when we use that term, we sometimes forget that people are also called to other things. And sometimes they're called for seasons to help refine talents.
And the current economy we're in is not the economy of 60 years ago when people expected to go to work for one company and work there for their entire career. things are different now. And some of our most effective ministers in the gospel are not theologically trained. You know, they're people who have other different kinds of experience and unique gift sets. But it did cause me pause. However, I didn't feel like, you know, some people feel the seas of God on their life to be a pastor and they can't be anything else. And for those people, I mean, this would be a betrayal, right? But for me, I didn't have that seizing. I thought this would be a great thing to do. And when I was getting ready to go to law school, I said, there's no reason I would ever stop serving a church. It'd be just stop getting paid by the church to serve the church. And I was extremely young and immature. So let's just confess that out front too. So SMU invited me to come to law school there. And so I went back to Southern Methodist University in Dallas and continued to date Mary Ellen. And
does this actually put you closer to Mary Ellen?
Oh, much. I'm now an hour away.
Because she's still in Fort Worth area?
I'm now an hour away.
Oh, this is much better
much
then
better.
For that part of it.
Yes. Fortunately, that was a school that accepted me. But anyway, so when I got there, immediately Cyril Miller called me back and said, we have some churches. If you wanted to work part-time during law school, we have some churches that need leadership. And I said, that's what I was asking for in the beginning. And so they gave me the Gainesville and Denton church.
Okay. So
and those are an hour north.
Yeah. I was going to say, they're not that far away.
Yeah, but they are. And so I'm going through a really difficult travel period. My car broke down. I'm in law school. I'm going to school all week. And then on the weekend, I run over to Love Field in Dallas and rent a car. I drive down in the Sabbath morning early and I pick Mary Ellen up and we go up to Gainesville and we spend from morning until late night ministering all over Gainesville. And then I take her back to Keene, drop her off, and then I go back to Dallas.
So she's still in
school. And, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And she's living with her folks. And at this point, I think she's in maybe court reporting school. And so.
Well, that's actually a really great parallel profession here.
Right. So anyway, it was a lot of driving. And so at that point, we're out another car. And so graduated law school and married her about the same time. And then I became a lawyer and didn't get paid as a pastor for the next 25 years.
Okay, wait a minute. All right, so were you still pastoring during those 25 years?
I was helping in different places. When I started, my first law job was in Arlington, Texas, which is a mid-city right in between Dallas and Fort Worth. And so the Arlington church is a really great church. And at that time, Jim Gilley was the pastor, the late Jim Gilley, a very, very decent and great fellow, a Texas feature. And so he was the pastor and he allowed me to run the youth department. So I worked in the youth department for no pay and occasionally preached to the church. And he was the pastor. And so we did that for a number of years.
Okay. All right. So where do you set up practice?
I got a job.
What do you go into here?
So a couple of weird jobs just with law firms doing whatever they tell me to do at first. And then while I was doing that, along came the Adventist health system. So Mr. Welch was the head of the Adventist health system back in those days, another very great man with a very great legacy.
Why?
He was the great character that led and could draw together all of our hospital systems in North America. It was a period in which Don Welch was moving into that leadership position. It was a period in which our healthcare systems were moving away from being hospitals run by pastors to hospitals being run by professional administrators or presidents, they call them.
Okay.
And it was a real transitionary time. And we were getting the hospital system separate for liability purposes from the church structure. lot good happened because of that. A lot bad happened because of that. We understand all that. But the fact is, that's when all that was happening. Don Welch emerged as the man that everyone respected in the healthcare system. And so he pulled them all together by sheer force of his personality and made the hospital group all one. They call it Adventist Health System US. And they were self-insured. And so they asked me to come and help them with their self-insurance claims. They were bringing the claims in-house. And so I worked in their claims system.
Okay.
1990-ish.
Like legal kind of thing?
Right.
Or just
I'm managing,
processing claims?
I'm managing lawyers who are defending medical malpractice and hospital professional liability claims.
Okay.
Right.
Well, this actually, all your whole story is like bridging all together in my mind here now, because I didn't know all this. Is the word you're looking for. There you go. It's actually, so much of you makes so much sense to me now. All right, so you're working for Adventist Health Systems,
right? When Welch retired, Ron Herr took over. Ron Herr, very good man, didn't have the charisma or the gravitas that Don Welch did, and the hospital groups all went their own ways.
And that's why we have so many different.
That's right.
So we were originally one.
Well, not originally, but yes, we were at 1.1.
At 1.1, and then it just
disintegrated. Okay. And so our office got shut down. So we were done, and each of the individual hospital groups, Kettering, the Orlando group, the two California groups, the Loma Linda, and then the rest of California and Hawaii and all that. So they just went their own ways. And so I went to work. I opened my own office a little bit, tried to do a few things. And interestingly, Mary Ellen and I both left employment at the same moment, and we both opened our own offices on the same day, which is a real courageous experience, or stupid, one or the other. And
we'll go with courageous. Okay, this sounds a whole lot better.
Let's stick with courageous. And
did you guys both know that you were doing this?
Yeah,
I mean, you're like,
we communicated.
That's
and we officed together. We got some rental space together, and we rented some other people. It was a really fun time. It was a good time, and learned a lot about a lot of different things. It wasn't very long after that I tried a case against a fellow that worked for Farmers, and so he said, "Hey, we need a lawyer," and so he said, "Would you like to come apply?" And so I went to work for Farmers, and I was there for
Farmers Insurance Company?
Farmers Insurance Company, yeah. And so they have in-house counsel that defend their claims against their insureds. And so I did a lot of trial work there. So I tried a lot of lawsuits in Dallas, Fort Worth, and surrounding counties. Lived in Arlington, and had a lot of really good experience. Became board certified in personal injury trial law. So good experience.
Personal injury and what?
Personal injury trial law.
Personal injury trial law.
It's a long name, but that's what they call it.
Okay. So what does that exactly mean?
The board certification or personal injury trial law? Personal
injury trial law.
Okay. So whenever a person has a claim because they were injured by somebody else, theoretically, they believe they were injured by somebody else, they file a lawsuit. If there is insurance, then the insurance company hires the lawyer or provides the lawyer for the defendant. And they try the case.
Got it.
And so that's what we did. Tried a lot of cases.
Yep.
Auto wrecks, homeowners things, every kind of thing.
All right. So how long do you do this?
That was 6 years. And then a friend of mine who did plaintiff work said, I want to open an office in a small outlying town. And I happen to live in Granbury, Texas. And so he said, do you want to open the office for me? I said, sure, be happy to. That sounds fun. And so I left Farmers and opened his office. He had a chain of branded offices across the Metroplex and around Texas. And I ran it for him for a year. He did not think that it was making enough money, although it made a lot of money. He didn't think it was making enough money. So I bought it from him, and I kept the office going under my name, and he went back to the big city where he could make more money.
More money.
And so I had my own office for a number of years then. That's when Rob Sweezy of Adventist Health System called me and asked if I'd be interested in coming here to work for the Adventist Health System as their claims director.
Coming here to
Silver Spring, Maryland.
So Adventist Health System is now.
Yeah. So they died after 2 years.
Okay.
I had that 2 years, then they went away.
Okay.
So then I've been working for Farmers and myself for.
All right. So what is Rob Sweezy?
He's the president of Adventist Risk Management. Did I say health system?
You did, and that's why I was like, I thought that it went away, and that's what was kind of confusing
Adventist
me
Risk
here for
Management.
a second. Okay, now this is making so much more sense.
His office in Silver Spring here.
All right, so you come. So how do you know each other? Is it just
I have no idea. Somebody gave him my name, and I don't even remember at this point who. He told me at the time, but I don't remember who. Anyway, somebody gave me.
You can blame them later.
Yes, somebody gave me his name, and we had a really nice ranchette out in Granbury. We were very happy there.
It's a nice
area. And the housing prices here were obscene, and so it was a hard choice to move up here. But
now, do you have a family at this point?
Yeah, my mother was still in San Antonio, and I have 2 little girls, and of course Mary Ellen, and then her parents are in that area out there. I think they were in Granbury.
So you have family that's down there. You have a family you'd have to be moving, and you're a Texas guy,
right? Yeah, it was hard. It was a very, very hard decision.
Not as cold as Michigan here, there.
No, and
so
we knew that.
I will tell you that.
And we learned a lot of things. You know, when we got here, it is a great organization. Adventist Risk Management is great. It's a great.
I'll keep reminding you that that's who you work with,
confused.
or you worked with and now work with.
It's a great organization, and it does a really supernaturally good work that really is very, very important to the church. But
let's actually explain.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some people who have no clue what Adventist Risk Management is.
Quick history.
Yes.
1936. It became clear that purchasing insurance individually for churches and things out on the open market was probably not our best play. And so a fellow said, you know, we could do this in-house. And the General Conference appropriated $25,1936 and formed an organization to do insurance, self-insurance for the Adventist Church. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but in order to insure expensive things, small insurers can't do that. So you have to start making alliances. But it's much easier for an insurance company that's established like this, a self-insurance company, to make those alliances. So from 36 up until 90-something, mid-90s, they're doing all kinds of really neat work, good work, lots of work with Lloyd's of London and all the big insurers and developing those relationships. A wave took the insurance industry, especially the self-insurance industry in the mid-90s, and that is the wave of what's called captive insurance. Captive insurance is a real insurance company that's domiciled in a captive-friendly state. Ours is Vermont. It was the first really friendly captive state, allowing us to have a real insurance company.
So you like captive? Like
captive.
I'm holding you captive, kind
right.
of?
So a captive insurer is owned by its insureds.
Okay.
But not in the sense of a mutual insurance company, but it's owned. In other words, we're owned by the company. We are a subcorporation of the General Conference Corporation. All right. And so we have this captive insurance company called Gen Con Insurance Company of Vermont.
So clever.
Yeah, this is very clever. And so Gen Con Insurance Company of Vermont holds the risk of all that we insure. But because it's a captive insurance, because it's professional, because we've been around for a very long time, we are able to deal with other insurance companies. And this is extremely important because we can't insure the Sligo Church. Sligo Church is just too valuable. We're too small. So what we do is we buy excess and reinsurance. Okay. And I won't go into the details of that. You can look those up on Wikipedia and they'll explain it to you. But the point is,
I feel like someday we'll have to have a podcast episode that's not about people, that's just about like, let's learn about risk management.
And so many good things that people need to learn about their own personal insurance in North America. It's very important, but another day. So we purchase a lot of layers of insurance to give the church the limits that it needs in the markets that they can't get to without a company like ours. And so that's what we do. We have GenCon Insurance Company of Vermont. We have GenCon Insurance Company International in Gibraltar to write different parts of the world. And then we have Adventist Risk Management, which is the management company that employs the employees and actually manages these departments and these claims.
I am really excited because I love learning things.
Okay.
And I had no idea about any of that. And I actually feel like I kind of understand a lot of things within it. I had no idea that we had all these.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating, actually. So
to get even farther, there are places all over the world, in the Far East and elsewhere, that have, and Australia, that have their own trusts. Because insurance is like this. You don't know it on your homeowner's insurance. You buy it from, say, farmers.
This is not a commercial for farmers insurance.
Not.
Just to be clear,
and I don't buy from farmers. So anyway, so I buy from who I buy from, and transparent to me, they cover me for the whole value of the house, but they've also offloaded layers of that to other people, other insurers, and that is the way insurance works, and that's the way it works with us too. We cover a certain base amount of each kind of claim to be the primary insurer.
Okay.
But there's another way to look at that, because some of the churches, some of the entities retain their own risk up to a certain number. But the point is, we're the primary insurer, and then we purchase lots of layers from other insurance companies that you've heard the names of, and many you haven't.
Okay. All right. So now we all have been Adventist Risk Management 101.
Primer,
yeah. Dummies Guide to Adventist Risk Management. I'm not actually sure that was even at a dummies level, but we're gonna keep going with it. So you're called up here, and obviously you move because we've established that.
So
what do you do again here?
I direct the claims.
Okay. So when people submit,
churches specifically, now, so there's property claims, and then there's casualty claims. Okay. So on a property claim, a church gets struck by lightning and burns. Okay. Somebody has to figure out what the value of the church is, how much it costs to replace it, and then muster those funds up and send them the funds so that they can rebuild their church. Okay, so that's what a claim department does. On a casualty claim, it's a good bit more complicated, because in this case, the church van rear ends another car, and that person has a speculative neck injury. We don't know how bad it is. The doctors probably don't even know how bad it is. And so they want to be paid for their medical bills and their pain and suffering. And so usually there's a lawsuit involved, and we have lawyers to handle those kinds of claims. And so property, casualty. We also do a whole bunch of other lines of business that you don't have time for.
Okay, excellent. So you're dealing with property, though, because that's what claims was.
No, claims is property and casualty.
Okay, so you're dealing with both of these things.
Right.
You worked here for how many years?
2 years.
2 years. That's all you could handle.
Texas a lot.
I was good. That's all you could handle of Maryland.
It was a problem. I miss Texas. There were a lot of other issues. I don't want to be prophetic, but I did foresee the housing collapse that we were going to see in 2008, and I said, we don't want to be here when that happens in a house that we can't sell.
It was hard. We actually sold our house about a year or two after, and it was not. This is not where you want to be losing money on houses.
Texas property values were much more reasonable, so we moved back to Texas. I reopened my practice and practiced in Granbury for a few more years, and then we had a problem at the church. I was always helping at some church, and I was helping at the Granbury church. And there had been
the pastoral spirit never actually left you.
No, I was always preaching.
So
at the church and,
so you may be serving as a lawyer and working in claims, but you have a pastoral heart.
Sure. So I'm trying a lot of lawsuits. I'm trying a lot of cases in a small town. So I'm doing everything. I'm doing family law, criminal, personal injury, all of it. And then problem at the church, the conference secretary came to me and was trying to work with the problem. And I knew the personality, so I was helping him. And he said, we have a problem in another church. Do you think you'd be interested in coming back to ministry? And I said, certainly, I'd consider it. And so he invited me to go to a church in North Dallas, where my best man from my wedding was the head elder. And there had been a kind of a pastor disaster there. And so we stepped in.
Pastor disaster.
And tried to resolve that issue. It took some extra pastoral skills. And so we did. And God is good. And the church became level-headed again. And then...
So let's talk a little bit
Sure.
about this transition.
All right.
Because we know why you transitioned out. Now you're not out, but
Yeah,
out of
right. No, I
official,
understand.
whatever.
Paid
You're
ministry.
coming back in.
Yeah.
And I have to think that lawyers might make a tiny bit more than a pastor does.
Yeah.
And, you have a family, you've moved back.
And by this time, we have 3 daughters.
Okay. Yes. I know your youngest.
Yeah.
Precious, one of my daughter's
Right.
friends. And so you have 3 kids. And
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, let's go back into pastoral. What
We had
on
a
earth? What-
plan. Yeah. It best laid plans. But it looked like we counted the cost, build a tower and all that sort of thing. And it looked like it would work. It didn't work like we hoped it would, but it worked.
What about in your own heart and mind? I mean, it's a pretty big jump. Did you feel this conviction, the calling again? Or did you just see it? This is part of God's journey for me.
Yeah.
And I don't need to understand the end from
No question.
the beginning.
That's where I am. Generally speaking, what's our big slogan? I will go. When God has an opportunity that needs a filling, and it seems like that my gifting is appropriate to that. How do you really say no?
Mm-hmm.
And I was working very, very hard down there, and there's money, but there's also the stress involved. I didn't realize how stressful it would be to try to come into a pastor disaster experience, but
Now, I'm going to guess, this is actually our transition out of law at this point.
right. So I practiced law actively, both for myself, for others, and for the health system and the ARM for 25 years. And so that was that 25 years.
Okay. So we've now officially transitioned out of our legal.
I still have my law license, and I'm fine
I'll
with
remember that just
Yeah.
in case.
Okay. I'm not licensed in Maryland.
We'll give
Licensed in
We'll get some
Texas.
advice
Yeah.
and move to
Yeah.
Texas.
There
I
you
don't
go.
know. Here we go.
And so it just seemed like the right thing to do.
All right. So we're back in pastoral ministry. We're working.
Took 4 or 5 years for that church to become really stable again. And I forget what I was complaining to the conference about. I was talking to Elton Demorais on the telephone.
Who is now currently the president of Texas Conference.
He was not then. I think he may have been
Ministerial
secretary. And I was complaining to him about something. Anyway, as I'm
I
complaining,
love your smile as you're recounting
I'm
the story.
I'm trying to figure out what I was complaining about, and I don't want to go into that. But anyway, what I was
We
complaining
don't need
about,
to know. We don't know that
It was
for
a
this.
valid complaint that most people wouldn't understand. So anyway, I complained, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, he said, "Have you ever thought about being an administrative pastor?" And I said, "I don't know what an administrative pastor is. Can we finish my conversation before we go to your conversation?" And he finished my conversation. And then he said, "We have another problem." And so he invited me to come and interview for the Keene Church, and as administrative pastor. And so we did that, and we looked at that, and we went to the Keene Church. And so we were there for 2015 through 2021.
So this the Keene Church, for our listeners and viewers, is actually the church that is on the campus.
Technically across the street from the campus.
Across the street. Okay.
Yeah.
It's basically on the campus. But to use proper
You expect
words.
me to be precise, I trust.
Yes. Yeah. So preciseness is it's right next to Southwestern Adventist University.
It's the university church.
Yeah. So so now you're kind of fixing some other
trying
to
to assist in a problem that they've got there. Yeah.
So what I see is God has actually gifted you with an incredible talent of being able to find solutions and to figure out how to fix them. And he gave you a pastoral heart.
And extra pastoral skills.
And extra. Well, I see like this is where that legal part of you even kind of comes in, being able to see it.
That's the extra pastoral skills.
The extra, so it's like he's actually crafting this really beautiful package. This person who knows how to fight for justice, who can take care of it, understand all the little details, but cares deeply for people.
Yeah, and that is the beauty of ministry. I've always said that the privilege of being a pastor is the privilege of being paid to love a group of people with abandon. Don't have to worry about making a living some other way. We pay the pastor to love this group of people. And that's a beautiful opportunity. I mean, it's really a privilege, isn't it? Nobody else gets that, right? So it's a beautiful opportunity. Again, it's different in North America than it is the rest of the world. Somebody's watching from someplace else. They have 20 and 30 churches that they're pastoring, and they're essentially a conference president from North America. If you're in some of the Central American places where they have all those churches. So it's a different job description. But in North America, our job description is to love the people. So at some point, and you can correct my story if I'm mistaken here. At some point, Adventist Risk Management finds itself having some issues. Well, they don't have a president.
So Karnick, who was your boss for a period there, for your 2 years that you were here, Karnick, who is still serving in the office of general counsel, takes it on as an intern, and in addition to his other job, he becomes the interim president of Adventist Risk. Yes, and no one else really could have done it because no one else has a clue. There's a very small group of people who understand what they do over there at Adventist Risk Management. And even if a person's worked there for a couple of years, if they've worked in a certain department, they really don't know what the other departments do. It's really technical and complicated. And so Karnick was the only person who really could step up that quickly.
Yeah. Bob Kite could have because he was the president before, but he's retired and far away, and I don't think he would have done it. Very, very, very great man. But
so obviously Karnick does not want to serve in this forever. So they start a search committee, as we always do. And at some point, your name must be...
Karnick, I guess, gave my name to Alex Bryan.
Okay. So you've been brought back into ministry.
Yeah.
Could you have ever foreseen this insane...
I'm telling you, it's a roller coaster. Yeah.
So what was that tension? Like, you've gone back into pastoral ministry. Now you're being called to be the president of Adventist Risk Management.
Yeah. And one of the funny things is that Karnick took a survey of, the Adventist Risk Management staff and said, what do you think is going on? How's it feeling to you, in this transition time? And they said, everything's going to be fine as long as they don't hire a pastor to be the president.
Oops.
So I cherish that close to my heart. Yeah.
So. Yeah. It takes a certain skill set, as you said, to be able to manage that kind of capacity. Right. So you are a pastor, and obviously you were hired. Did you struggle with that decision at all?
No, that one was easy. I mean, if you look back, hindsight and all that, if you look back, I was obviously made for this. I mean, God prepared. I mean, isn't it obvious? I mean, I didn't have to really
that's
fight
the most,
that one.
That's the most interesting thing I find about most of these interviews and stories is that often, some people, the trajectory seems very like it makes sense.
Right.
But there's some of us that it's just like in our wildest imagination, we couldn't have actually said this. But when we see the journey that God has led us on, we're like, how could we have missed it?
Yeah.
But you can only say that because you are where you're at.
Right.
So you're called. You come to Adventist Risk Management, and
August
once
10th,
again,
my birthday and my anniversary of 2021. It's a week before school starts, and so our youngest daughter is needing to be enrolled in school, and so we had to move in less than a week.
We did the same thing.
Yeah.
My daughter was supposed to start school at Chisholm Child Academy, and instead we're moving
exactly
our
where
family
we were.
across country.
That's right.
It's a tough transition. As a father,
Yes.
I'm sure that this is because we recognize we're not moving little kids anymore.
No, that's right.
We're moving teenage daughters,
Right.
across the country to people they don't know.
Right. She's going to become a junior in high school, which is a terrible time to move a kid. I mean, it's just not good. But they were both really good schools, and so that's that. But that was the hardest part of the whole thing. The other is that my wife was on staff at the church at Keene, and so it was difficult for her to leave that, because that was for her sort of the same story as for me, and her gifts were being pleasantly used there. And so it was very difficult for her to step away from that.
But you felt God's call.
Sure.
And the family agrees.
Yep.
And you move.
Yep.
And you're not moving into Adventist Risk Management during this like the best. I mean, I don't want to say it badly, but
no, don't say it badly. They're great people.
We're going through a struggle though. Once again at this time,
yes,
and which once again
people.
God has placed you using your very specific skill set to be able to see a problem and try to be able to help navigate with your love of people.
Right.
Which this is the beautiful thing. I understand what they were saying, that we don't, as long as you don't bring in a pastor. Yeah. But actually it's your pastoral heart that also makes you as effective as you are.
Right. And it's just, we have 100-ish employees in North America, and they're really good people.
Okay.
So really, really good people.
So where are we now?
We're a year and a half in, and I'm still learning loads of stuff that I didn't know as a claim director and that I haven't learned yet. And so we're making contracts twice a year, big contracts twice a year for all the excess and reinsurance products, and serving the church. Our ministry is to protect the church's ministry. Everything we do is to preserve, protect, and restore ministry assets for our church. And we could talk about claims, and we could talk about all those other things I know you don't have time for, but I'll just tell you that whenever there's a loss in the church that causes a monetary loss, that's what we're here for. But it also causes an enormous distraction for people who are doing ministry. And there's also a reputational loss every time there's a claim of any kind. And so our goal is to minimize those losses and to guide people back to the ministry that God has called them to do.
I love that. So I have to ask one question, because you said there's very few people. Karnak was natural. You coming in was natural. This isn't necessarily about you, but I think it actually is important. What are you doing to create the next Jews?
Yes. So
because mentorship and discipleship matters. Because, when we talk about a lot of the roles that we serve here in the general conference, you can grab from pastors and, different things much more easily. But yours is a little bit of a different thing. How are you making certain that the legacy of this church is being protected by mentoring?
So we have a whole program now that they created about the time that Karnak was here, because it was obvious that they needed to do that. And so we have a whole program for making sure that we have people to sustain through the loss of individuals. And so we're training people for every position. And there are, in my opinion, 3 or 4 people in the company that could run it. So it's not a problem.
That means you're doing a good job.
Or they are.
A leader has to be willing to allow other people to shine.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've always loved about you. You've never been someone I've observed that has a big ego. You've been someone who's always genuinely cared for people.
I do care for people.
And I see this in the conversations that we've had in the past. I see it because at times you get even a touch emotional.
Right.
Because we're not just talking about assets. We're not just talking about churches. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about humans. We're talking about our brothers and our sisters.
And we have the opportunity at Adventist Risk Management to help people to prevent future damage to people. My position is that we're all stewards for a time. I'm the president of this company for a time. I won't be forever, obviously. Nobody is. But in our churches, we steward the buildings. We steward the ministries only for a time, right? And we steward the people. And so we've got to guard against damage to any of those. We've got to really nurture all 3 of those: buildings, assets, actual ministries, and people. Those are the 3 things. And if we can prevent one person being injured because of something the church does, and we have many times, we just don't know which ones we've prevented. We only know the ones that got past us. But that's our goal, is to make sure that people and ministries and buildings don't get lost unnecessarily and suffer those setbacks.
James, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you for talking with me.
Thank you for loving people. I genuinely mean it. It's one of those things, because we're in Sabbath school. We go to the same church when neither of us are traveling sometimes. And that's one of the things I've always loved about you, is just your heart for people. And it just comes out. And I could think of no better person to have leading Adventist Risk Management this time.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Than you. So
that's very kind.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of A&N Profiles with James Winegardner. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel wherever you're tuning in today, so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for spending this time with us, and join us next week as I continue to get to know the life stories of more inspiring people.